Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Customer Insights session of 2021. And Happy New Year to you all. I hope this year will be a little bit better than the past year. And yeah, everything goes to a better direction with the pandemic and everything. Firstly, I want to check that the audio is fine. So could you please send a message to the chat that you are hearing me so I know? Let's see. It's fine. Audio is fine. Great. So at least some of you are hearing me. Great. Thank you so much. Also, this webinar will be recorded, like we always record these. So after the session, you will receive a link to your email if you want to check out the session afterwards again, or if you want to share it to your colleagues so that they can check it out too. All right, so I'm your host today. I'm running these monthly webinars here in Solibri. I'm the product marketing manager. My name is Riina. Nice to meet you all online. Also, we have Lauri Luoma with us. He is going to be answering any Solibri related questions if you have any when we are having the Q&A session. So welcome, Lauri, also.
Yeah, welcome to the webinar on my behalf as well.
Thanks. So, but today's agenda. So we have case based from the Netherlands. We have Robin Kramer online, and he will share his knowledge about increasing usability and data value, and especially focusing on the Solibri classification. He also has an example case from Knauf, so it will be a really interesting case, and there's some demo as well going to be in this presentation. After Robin's presentation, there will be time for some audience questions in the Q&A part of this webinar. So please, at any point of this session, you can send questions you have to the chat or the question box on the GoToWebinar panel. It would be nice if you can mention if the question is for Robin or if it's for us at Solibri. So it makes it easier to handle the questions when we come to the Q&A part. Also, before we start the presentation, I will run a quick poll. So this time we'd like to hear a bit more about your expertise. What is your role in a construction project? So you should be now able to give your replies. We see a bit what type of people we have here today joining us. I am going to wait for a little while more to give you time to select your reply from here. All right, I think it looks like the majority has given their votes now, so yeah, let me close the poll and show you the results. Yeah, so a third roughly are doing some kind of BIM consulting, and almost as much are involved in our architecture, construction, engineering, a bit less, but yeah, looks interesting and great to have you all joining us today. But now, yeah, let's get to the actual point. So I will give the floor now to Robin. So welcome and great to have you with us today and see your presentation.
Well, good morning. Welcome everybody to the webinar. And today we're going to talk about how we can increase usability and data value with the help of Solibri classifications. And I would like to start with a bit of a personal story. I'll talk about myself, Robin Kramer, and yeah, why change? And it began for me when I was 15 years old. And my younger years was in high school, and yeah, my vision was to be an architect, and so that was the direction that I was heading towards, and also working in my free time in the supermarket. And one day there was a fire at the cheese department of the store, and as committed as I am, jumped on my bike and checked if my colleagues were okay in that in the supermarket. And the supermarket was destroyed. Everything in the supermarket had to be thrown away, but luckily everybody was okay and nobody was hurt in that due to the fire. But yeah, that supermarket had to be opened again. And a few weeks later, it was already opened again, and they renovated the whole store and changed the whole inventory, and yeah, it just opened again. And that time, the plan to be an architect that had to be changed to construction management. That to renovate it that fast, that yeah, I was quite interested in that topic as well. A few years later, I also contacted the company and also worked for that company, the same company that did the renovation of that supermarket. And they told me that they received 2 phone calls that day. First phone call was, yeah, please, there's a fire, and make sure that everybody is okay, and start the process to open that supermarket again. The second phone call from the headquarters of the supermarket was about what is the cause of the fire. It was at the cheese department, but it was also where, what was the problem, and which supermarket has the same installation. So I was already interested in that part as well, and the need for validated information just shows up at that time. That was also the background. So construction management, it had to be. I think when I was 15 years old, it had to be construction management. But working in that industry, it also turned to BIM implementation. Why do we have to change? And that validated information that wasn't really prepared. It wasn't really there. So they told me years later that they dove into the drawings and searched for the other supermarkets that had the same installation also in the supermarket. So it wasn't really there, that information. And yeah, also later I focused on change management. How can we change the construction industry and also change the way of working in the construction industry to prepare for this more extreme case? But yeah, the question of validated information that is, I think, every day coming up. So that's my role, BIM consultant. And what do I do in my role as BIM consultant? It's the challenge every day to explore the limits of building information management and implement this into the organizations. I'm focusing on the implementation and focusing on change management in teams, and also happy that we're also certified Solibri trainer. Started in last year and give a lot of trainings also in Solibri. And we do this, as you see, the other members of the base team, not doing it alone. With our team, strong team, with each and every individual has his own expertise in digital transformation, like the strategic level, the project information management, or linked data management. what do we do then with BASED? From those different expertises, we're working to transform and support organizations in the digital transformation. We focus on the change management according to the latest information technology, but also focus on a practical way of working. To make it practical, it will also kind of work. We work for contractors, subcontractors, property development and housing associations, and even for the Dutch Bank and Amsterdam Airport Schiphol, all familiar with digital transformations and the implementation of digital transformation. In this webinar, I also explain how Knauf, one of our clients, is using Solibri and how we can support them. In this webinar, I'm going to talk about how to implement change from our point of view. Later on, also focusing on data validation. What is really data validation from our point of view, and why are we using classifications in for this topic? We're going to talk about classification workflow, and later on also the use case of Knauf International. If you have any questions, feel free to write them down and ask them at the end in the closing. And as Rina told us, also the Q&A session. How to implement change? Adopting BIM isn't just about technology. It is about implementing change. And we talk a lot about change for this topic. And it's focusing on these 4 topics. It is focusing on management, process, technology, and the people and culture, a cultural part of the implementation. Management, I think all familiar that it is about also business management, enable new business opportunities. And like the previous example with the supermarket, it is also that we see it as a new way of working that creates new opportunities for the business nowadays. And that wasn't really there when I was 15 years old, and they started to look at all the drawings for the supermarket. The information wasn't really there, and so the management had to see that we have to change this one. We have to change the process, we have to change the technology, and we have to change how we work. I want to highlight the 2 of them, the management, and I want to highlight the people and cultural part of the implementation of change. Mostly about the process and technology part. There's a lot of webinars also focusing on the process and the technology. So that's why I'm more focusing on the other 2. And for management, that we admit that we use the digital building data for these daily challenges to respond better to events like the fire in the supermarket. It's more about crisis policy, but also work better, faster, and easier on the sustainable real estate. We see that we're using the building data for a lot of things, a lot of applications. And also about the result that we can increase customer experience with the same building data. And I think a lot of you also working on how to work with the BIM data. We use it for planning, scheduling, also cost calculations. That is focusing on management. Why are we using that building data? And about increasing the data value, it will evolve from data to really that wisdom. And these steps are in this image, that from the data when you make the data meaningful, that it will turn to information. And of course, also to knowledge, insights, and wisdom. But when you receive a BIM model, it has a lot of data. And I will talk also about the workflow, how we use classifications. And that is mainly focusing on how to evolve from data to wisdom, how we can use that data to inform the decision making. It looks very innovative to create wisdom from data, but I'll show how we use classifications to create the needed insights and wisdom for the Knauf case. And you see also at the bottom of the image, it is about data management, but also about sense making. How can we, is every data involved? Is every object involved? And a bit of sense making, and that is the base for the decision making later on. Decrease the data volume and increase the data value. When talking about people and culture, it is also that you be aware that the people and cultural aspect of the implementation is really hard. It's based on the personal types and how they react on change. And you see all the different personal types: visionary, the active promoter, more the consultants, working at the same job as well, always working with the actively promoting and visionary about how the technology can really helping us. And it's more an emotional reaction on the technology. The main people are more the positive participants or the skeptic participants, but you have also the layers and active blockers, and you can manage them. The visionary and active promoter are really easy adapting those new technology, but you have to more focus on the second half, the positive participants until the active blockers, and also focusing on inform and show benefits. Why do we have to change? And I used the topic for the subject for the fire at that store over and over again, because when we had the BIM data from every supermarket, it had to be a push of the button to really create that insight that where was that same installation again, and for example, which supermarket should we close to prevent a new fire. And focusing on the people and culture, also core business from our direct partner, NL 1809. And yeah, what is our focus at NL 1809? It's a direct link also to Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's the one most adaptable to change. And yeah, that's we made that link to also in the naming of our company, because Charles Darwin was born in 1809. But we focus on the match of technology, a match of talent meets technology to create that success. For example, we also strongly advise to focus on BIM awareness before joining a software training to create an even more successful training and also learning curve. And it's more at why are we learning these new technology and how can it help? And if we start a tool training without answering that question, I think we can throw away all those hours in a tool training, because when you didn't really know why, and yeah, then it's not really helping. So BIM is related to the hard skills, the tools, technology, the processes. But with our direct partner, NL 1809, we focus a lot of the soft skills as well. And I strongly advise to do that as well in the implementation. Focus on the soft skills and the why of the implementation. Next, I want to talk about data validation, the process of data validation, and how we can use classifications to get your hands on the BIM models and the elements and their properties to really create the insights that we need for the business cases. And I'll start with this one. And I think, well, you're all familiar with this and this workflow. We talk a lot of data validation, but the experience is that it is throwing these BIM models towards the other company. And it's not really collaboration. I think we all can conclude that working together that we have to work together to create better results instead of a Dutch sentence, throwing it over the fence without looking to it, but you just throw it over. And we see that a lot in the construction industry. And I think it's not really only happening in Holland, but also worldwide. But what is the direction? The direction is, of course, the single source of digital information, the single source of truth, as we call them also, where the CDE is the main entrance, and we can connect a lot of apps, connected apps for that insights that we need in our daily jobs. And we're focusing on the easy accessibility of the data, but it all starts with data validation. If the data is incorrect, then I can throw away every insight that we create with the data. It all starts with the data validation. And that's also why we use Solibri a lot to validate the data in correctness and usability. The workflow, hopefully you're all a bit familiar with the workflow from creating a BIM model, and they transfer it with an IFC file towards the other parties involved in the project, and we coordinate them, we validate them, and the communication is going back to the other companies with BCF. We receive the IFC and we export the communication with BCF. And when the BIM model is correct, also gonna use that same data for our insights and for the construction projects. But what you see is that the coordination, mostly it's done by the BIM coordinators. And when they check their own BIM file, their own BIM model, they know exactly how they can use the same model. But I think every discipline who's involved in the project will have the same question. How can we use the BIM model? What is already involved? What isn't? And that's also going to the next slide is, what is the process? What do we do with Solibri? And how can we coordinate and validate in a way that we can all use the model for each and every task in the project? It's about checking the quality for each and every model or discipline, and that you do it for each and every individual model, and later on we can combine them for a coordination check, mostly done by the BIM coordinators. So later on in the project we can use the data. And today I want to talk about how we use classifications in this one. Because these steps, quality check, coordination check, and use, most of the users that we experience during the training, everyone is thinking about rule sets. Quality check is a rule set, coordination check is a rule set, and use, we then only at that step we use the other functionalities of Solibri. But starting with, for example, 1,000 building elements in a different single BIM model, yeah, you can use the rule sets, but you're not that familiar then with the BIM model itself. So we use classifications a lot in this one, and Solibri has different functions with main functions like rule sets and information takeoff. But we give classifications a central place in the workflow. I will explain the relation with rule sets and information takeoffs later. But why classifications? It is about the ordering data. And you see at the left side more a simplified example. These blocks will simulate the project with a lot of different information. With classifications, we learn how to see the different elements. For example, to categorize them in color, to categorize and ordering them in shape or outer lines. And so when I look at the BIM model and I really need all the green blocks, I will go to the coloring thing and click on the green ones. But also solving questions like, can I get a green square? Yeah, I have to learn what is the green square, based on which properties. Related to BIM, we use classifications to find and categorize elements based on their data. For example, when I have 3 walls, each and every element has many properties. And what we're using classifications for is to create work packages. Work packages related to your core business. What is a work package? It's, for example, that we can recognize the different wall types. For example, limestone walls, metal stud walls, or concrete walls. Those are different walls, and with classifications, I can learn Solibri that it will move the, for example, this wall. This one is a concrete wall. That one will go to work package concrete walls, and based on their information, based on their properties, in the same BIM model. And by doing this, we're getting more and more familiar with the elements that are involved in the BIM model. And I will create sort of like buttons that I can find all the concrete walls, or I can find all the metal stud walls. Based on what we see and what we receive in model quality. And those work packages, we're gonna reuse them. So for example, a contractor is really familiar with the inner walls, and I make a category inner walls, and that will have all the elements for inner walls. Later on, we're gonna talk about Knauf, and Knauf, yeah, they are focusing on all the walls and the different types of walls. So their category is more specific to, for example, inner walls with a fire safety of 60 minutes, or a fire rating with 120 minutes. So get familiar with the elements, what is were involved in the BIM model, and create those categories in them. Work packages, we call them a lot, and we can reuse those work packages. We can reuse them in information takeoff, and we can reuse them in rule sets. So when I'm going to learn how Solibri will categorize these elements in, for example, the category inner walls, I've of course also an information takeoff, which will include all the recognized inner walls. We see that it helps a lot of users when they get firstly familiar with the elements, which one are involved in the BIM model, and which objects aren't involved, before going to the rule sets and information takeoff. Why does this workflow increase usability and data value? It's made the technical data more easy. For example, that BIM model with 15,000 elements, you have to really look deep in the BIM model to create the insights. For example, which are the limestone walls, or the metal stud walls, or the concrete walls, and by filter them yourself, you're going to be more familiar with the data and also those technical elements. Give it content and context. It's we think a really important step when using those BIM models. When we got the drawings a few years ago, when we received the drawings, and you're going to look into the drawings, and then you will recognize those elements. I was also at my study with coloring. I made those concrete walls red, made those limestone walls, made them blue. So it's about recognizing the elements, and yeah, do a lot of tricks with that data to create the insights that we need in the project. Talking about this more theoretical approach, I want to talk about Knauf, how we use these theory to help Knauf in their use cases and their business. For the ones who aren't familiar with Knauf, Knauf is a supplier of finishing and dry lining systems. I think market leader worldwide also in the dry lining systems. And they noticed that more and more parties in the construction industry are discovering working with BIM models. However, they also experience a lot of variation in the model quality in collaboration with the contractors and architects. And their question is, how can we review the models and focus on manufacturability and feasibility with their elements? We together with BASED, we worked on the new work process. How can we work with the received BIM models, filter their elements, and go to the correct analysis? What do we do with the received BIM models? Of course, we review the BIM models. Which ones did we do we have on this project? And we're gonna filter those elements. We're gonna filter the Knauf elements. That is the first step for them. Filter their elements, and when we do that, it is also analyzing those elements. Sorry for this. Analyzing the elements, and to really help their clients, it's about wall performance, wall in relation to the wall height, and wall thickness. Their check is focusing if these three parameters are in the right relation to each other. For example, the thickness of the wall and the relation to the height of the wall, it can only receive a certain of performance in sound quality, fire rating. The relation has to be correct, and their advice is focusing on their elements in the project to see if the elements are in the correct with the correct parameters and in the correct wall performance, height, and thickness ratio. After the analyzing, we do the automated check. We're gonna use the rule sets for those checks. We're gonna use information takeoffs for the check. But it started with filtering, and we do that filter in a way that we get the insight that we have everything involved. And that's also why we use classifications. The filtering, we can do some filtering in rule sets. We can do filtering with information takeoff. But with classifications, we receive a lot of more detailed insights in the objects that are in our filter. We do the automated check, and we assign the alternative Knauf walls, for example, or the wall systems. And everything that we see in this step, we communicate it back to for example, the architect or the contractor, where they have to be aware of in the project. You see also a small image in how the received BIM design. It contains slabs, it contains walls, based on different floors, building stories of the project. And they're advised to check and create an improvement advice. Which walls are okay based on the performance, the height, and the thickness, and which walls we have to take care of. For example, the wall on the right side, the thickness according to the performance of the wall and the height of the wall, that there has to be some improvement to create that wall, and maybe we can have to make them more thick than the other walls to get the performance that we need in the project. That is the improvement advice for the architect and constructing party involved. Let's go to Solibri to show you some of the analyzing that they will do with classifications. I'm now at Solibri, and to see a bit of introduction of the project. It is a cinema complex. Cinema complex in the Netherlands. We have a existing situation. This is the existing situation, and we have the new cinema complex in the project. Knauf received all the BIM models in this case, and when receiving those BIM models, the first step is to analyze the file. We analyze it in quality. For example, which building stories are involved. They use the basic IDM for this one, the standards in the Netherlands, but also worldwide used for which are the basic requirements that we have to take care of in this project, and file naming, but also building story. And my first conclusion that this is incorrect, and I can, by taking a look at the building stories, and I see that it has maybe 15 building stories. My first conclusion is that it isn't really correct. And also by seeing not really whole building stories, I also only see some strangely built building stories like this one. The building story isn't really correct filled up. Also looking at entities, and these classifications are just shit in, is shit out. So when I'm using this classification, it only shows which entities are involved in the project, and by clicking on them, I will give a direct insight in the elements. For example, the columns, the coverings, and the walls, the stairs, and for example, the roof. And by clicking through the classification, the insights are that we directly see which elements are involved, and also one of the first checks is the objects, which elements are also as a IFC object exported. And their first check as Knauf company is, of course, focusing on the walls. are each and every walls involved in the BIM project, in the BIM model, and aren't some walls exported as IFC objects. Also focusing on type and classification system, materialization, and load bearing, and each and every classification is focusing on to get an insight in what they how the data is based, the data is created, and how the data is exported. After the quick check in the file, they filter on their elements, and their elements are that they filter on what are the elements that they will have to create. The Knauf elements, we call them. And with this classification, we filter on the elements and based on, for example, materialization, the entity, or the classification system. And based on those requirements, we filter the Knauf elements. And you see that the visual filter is really strong in this one. So we see the Knauf elements, also the elements that we have to check. Maybe, and to check means that we can see if these walls maybe aren't now have to be to Knauf elements, but maybe we can turn them also into Knauf elements. And the coloring, that gives me a lot of insight. All the blue elements are now the elements that we are checking, and that we call them Knauf elements. This check is really powerful also for the next steps. And all the elements that we're gonna check with that Knauf also will involve in the advising, the improvement advice, have to be filtered on Knauf elements. And all the following classifications are based on this filter. For example, what is the fire rating on these elements? What is the acoustic rating on these elements? And everything focusing on the Knauf elements. And when using this way of working with classifications, it helps a lot of users with the data value and increasing data value to create the right insights. So fire rating, these are 60 minutes fire rating, and also acoustic rating. Everything only showing that the properties that were involved in this file. So and the next step is to create what are the different types of walls. Also, you see a lot of coloring, but the different types of walls in this project. And it is the same as the Knauf elements, but it will turn them into the different wall types that they are familiar with. The rest of the checks, of course, we use this one also in the rule sets, but their step, and you see also some numbering in this one. The first step is filter on the elements, filter on the Knauf elements, and the rule set, that's 2 steps ahead. The rule set based on the elements, that is a step later on in the project, and later on also in their analyzing. And what do they check later? Also the wall length. Is there a maximum on the wall length? And these walls are too long according to their requirements, or these walls are too high. Everything based on their how can we help the architect? How can we help to create an improvement advice to create that these walls will be made later on with the correct performance and the correct relation to the height and thickness. that's how they work with classifications at Knauf. And you see that classification is a technical thing in the BIM way of working, but it helps a lot of get the right insights. And I want to close this webinar also with some things to remember. Focus on the wisdom and decision making on the validated data. Focus also on the sharing that knowledge with that team. For example, how we use the Solibri to create that improvement advice, share that topic with the team, to involve them also in the implementation in that new way of working. And share knowledge is also focusing on share how the technique is working to create the needed insights. You see also some smart linking of settings. It is really important one. Back to Solibri, it is about linking from this classifications also to the next steps and the next steps and the next steps, to create the right insights, and later on create that advice back to the contractor and back to the architect. It is about smart linking of settings. And of course, collaboration is key to success in this one. Collaboration is it is always a hard one. Of course, start with training, but before training, start with awareness. Why do we have to change, and why do we need to change the way of working in the process? But collaboration is key. And back to the image that I showed before with throwing these BIM models over the fence. Get in touch with the suppliers and the architect of the BIM models, and talk about the requirements. Which requirements have to be involved in the BIM models to really do that investigation and really get that insights in the BIM models, and focus on these basic requirements. Not to give them an IDM that is 40 pages long, but what are the basic requirements, so that collaboration is much easier and that we can create successes with each other. It is focusing about the technical innovation, but focus also a lot of social innovation. Creative awareness, informing people, make them enthusiastic, and let them join is key to success. Focus also on those persons with can be a showstopper, and also let them join this new way of working. It is also, of course, a technical way. How can we use classifications? How can we use Solibri? How can we use an IDM, requirements? Way of typical technical problems, but it is more focusing also on the social innovation. Create those awareness, and together we can create success in this digital way of working in the construction industry. That's also how I want to conclude this webinar. Thank you all for joining this one.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks a lot. So now we still have time for your questions. If you have any questions for us, please send them to the chat or the question box. You can also tag if your question is for Robin or if it's for us at Solibri. So it's a little bit easier for us to handle those. And also this session has been recorded. If you joined a bit later on, you will get the link of the recording after the session to your email, so don't worry about that. But yeah, let's start going through the questions that we've got here so far. First question is for Robin. it is, are these elements manual or automated classified? I guess it means, is it manually or automatically classified? So this question came in when you were showing Solibri and the Knauf elements.
Good question. It is mainly automated. And let's go back to this slide. It is based on the recognizing elements in an automated way. We learned Solibri that we can recognize, for example, materials or wall types. So it can be automated, classified. But with that visual check that will turn blue and white, you have also a visual check, do I have every element involved? And that, I think, I'm saying this is a combination. So mostly it is automated, but it is depending on the quality of the BIM model. And that visual check is a really interesting one. Have I selected too many elements or too less elements? And which elements how can I also recognize those elements? Can I adjust the classification rules, or do I have to more manually select them? And manually is the last step. Mostly it is automated because you're more learning Solibri how to see those elements. So yeah, focusing on the automated, and the last step is when it is really isn't working in an automated way, then we can classify them manually.
Good, thank you. Then there is someone asking, could you show us how the classification within a classification is built?
Of course. For example, this one. This is the classification. It's called Knauf elements. And so the classification, it is about how we can do these elements. We can recognize those Knauf elements. And for example, later on in the project, let's do this one. No, this one. It is about the acoustic rating. And when I go to the settings, it is all focusing on the first filter. Which elements will have to on which elements does this classification have to work? And normally this is include any or include all the walls. But what I do here is I'm focusing, and it can be done with these 3 dots, focusing on a classification. And what I select here is, and I'm focusing on the result of a classification. So in this one, Knauf elements, and I'm focusing normally when I didn't do this, I can focus on these categories. And selecting the Knauf elements, the whole classification will only focus on the result of the previous classification, this one, Knauf elements. And why do we do this is also about that it is only focusing on the Knauf elements. But for example, by looking into the acoustic rating, it is also focusing on which elements are Knauf elements, but don't really involve also a property for acoustic rating or a value for acoustic rating. And so the insight is, of course, to see the elements, but also look at the elements who haven't really involved a acoustic rating property.
Thanks.
Hopefully it didn't speed it up too much, but
yeah,
by clicking in Solibri.
Yeah, you can maybe comment to the chat if that answered your question. There's also another question. I'm not actually sure if that already clarified that as well. So it's about the classification. So we know about classification like uniclass and properties of IFC, but how are these classification linkings or filters in Solibri created? So maybe, yeah, I don't know if it
it is what we see here is that Solibri creates a uniform classification, and that is the classifications of the classification system, and that's a different function. It is based on the classification system, and the classification is also the classifications of the functionality of Solibri. So I can also reuse those ones, but maybe it's also a question for Laurie how this is created.
Yeah, so Solibri reads in also the classification made in the authoring tool, like the one in this case, the uniform classification. And then Solibri has its own classification tool, which you can create these rules, and you can use them also for these kind of data validation purposes and visualizations. But yeah, I understand that they might be like confused together. So there's like different types of classification. But I guess this the way that Knauf is using is like taking it to the next level, kind of not just on the main uniform classification level, but for their like specific needs. And that's where you can use this Solibri classification tools to enrich the model. It's basically Solibri's way of enriching the IFC model, giving you more data. I hope that answered to the question on some level.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. All right, let's go to the next question, which I guess is also for Robin. Solibri can read elements classifications like wall slabs. Is it possible to control properties like fire rating from the element? Maybe you can tell us if it is possible to control properties from individual materials like physical properties. For example, a concrete wall with isolation has properties, but the concrete and insulation too, and it's independent from the element's properties. That was a long one, so I hope you got it.
It is indeed possible to create those rules. It is like the classification rules, and you can make the classification rules on an easy way, not really a deeply specified way. For example, if the material is concrete, then it is and you're a wall and the material is in concrete, then it will recognize those elements. But you can do something more specific and also involve more and more properties. And with material, you can, of course, search for some keywords, for example, concrete, but sometimes it gives too many results. And you can more specify it to, for example, that only value. For example, concrete 100 millimeters. I can specify it in that way. So that, and also related to the question, concrete and insulation. So, for example, that it doesn't really have to involve insulation, or it only select the elements that are involved that have an insulation material. And you can do to include elements, and you can also learn which elements do we have to exclude from the classification. So, for example, I'm focusing on the walls, but some wall types are excluded. Then I can learn with the classification rules that which elements, based on their properties, will have to be excluded. You can learn those things as well. So it is focusing on what do you see in the BIM model, which properties are involved, and which values did they choose. And you can make this as smart as you want to create categories for the need for that business
Thanks. Then there's one question that do you have any tips for filtering the information that is produced by native models? The trouble seems to be that there is too much information carried with the BIM model and not all of it correct or project specific.
Yeah, I think the tip is also, for example, reuse other classifications. So when it isn't really cleared in, for example, the type. So for example, when I'm clicking a random object, I have the type and name of the object, and I have material. In this case, they're more the same, but when I'm clicking on another object, it has a name, it has type, and it has the material. But what you see a lot is that when the type isn't really a correct value, then the naming is, or otherwise, that when the name and type aren't really make sense, that the material is. So there's always something that we can use, and I prefer that we go back to the discipline that created the BIM model, and that they can fix it, that they can make those to their correct requirements. But with using Solibri, we can also, with classifications, focus on another property. And we don't see a lot that there is an object and that no single property value is correct. There's always something correct, and maybe the layer is correct. When they've created models, for example, with SketchUp, SketchUp Pro, you can create BIM models from SketchUp, and then the layer is very accurate. And so always look for the where is the value still in a correct way involved in the element, and reuse those elements, those properties, and reuse those values. There's always a way.
That's a great tip. Thank you. Yeah, we are pretty much running out of time, and I guess that was all the questions we had today. So yeah, so I'd like to thank you everyone who were joining us today. And thank you very much, Robin, for your great presentation. Next time in February, we have a case from Auckland Airport. It's going to be on 10th December. You will get a link to register to this session later on after this webinar. So hope to see you again next month. And yeah, so thank you very much. And yeah, have a great day, great week, great month. Thank you, Robin. See you soon.
Thank you very much.
Bye.